Welcome to Talent Instinct, an electrifying space where we dive into how construction business owners revamp their hunt for top-tier talent by instinctivizing their efforts. It's time to spice up, relying on systems and processes, and discover prime insights on how to smartly apply their most important aspect, their instinct, as well as intellect, to pinpoint individuals who don't just fit in, but flourish. Let's face it, making the right hire for your business has never been more paramount. The stakes of the wrong hire can disrupt performance, profit, culture, and succession planning. Talent Instinct isn't about playing it safe. It's about conquering with calculated instinct.
Hi guys, lucky to have Craig Dearling here from Master Builders to talk about unconscious biasness. So a bit about him. He works in workforce services and they deal with work health and safety, industrial relations. They also have eDocs, which are amazing. They are your online forms with the Master Builders. I personally have been a member of Master Builders for quite a few years, and I even ring them just to get advice about different sort of cultural things, or what my rights are, and how I can get some even legal advice regarding contracts, whether it be commercial or resi. Is there anything else there, Craig, that I should add that you can tell us about your role?
No, look, that's a great introduction. Yeah, we're really about people. So we've got 9,500 members in the industry, small businesses, medium, large, and workforce services really look at that employment side of things and helping in relation to people.
And one thing that you have mentioned to me is that you really do love the workforce side, but also making sure that you're up with all of the legislation that's coming in. We're seeing some big changes with that, which actually has sparked this conversation for me with unconscious biasness, as well as, we've got a lot of sexual harassment sort of coming through. We've got a lot of other legislation. So I think it's actually really important, especially in construction, because we already deal with so much of this, that it can be a bit of a turn-off for people either in the industry or getting in the industry. So I think it's really important that, one, we are looking after the industry and the people in it, because we've certainly had some cultural changes, and we're certainly trying to implement more cultural changes, but also making sure that we're debunking this idea that they're going to be so big and, so much legislation that it's going to make it hard for us to carry on with our business.
Yeah, look, that's probably one of the major complaints we get from members when they contact us about all these changes. And I suppose Master Builders members, I would say, look, anecdotally, 80% of our members are small or micro businesses. So they don't have dedicated HR staff. They don't have dedicated health and safety people. It's what we call the mum and dad builders, where it's just a couple, and they run a building business, and they've got a lot of regulation from the QBCC. They've got National Construction Code. They've got Australian standards. They've got a range of laws they've got to comply with. And then from a workplace point of view, then we have, Fair Work Act. We have the Work Health and Safety Act, of course, which adds that complexity. And people do often say, look, it's just so difficult being in business and employing people, because it's not just what we pay them, it's the work cover, it's the super, it's the payroll tax, it's everything that comes with it. And when we look at things like unconscious bias, bullying, sexual harassment, those sort of topics, people often perceive it as just, well, that's just another bloody thing I've got to worry about. I like to, when I'm speaking to members, say that, well, actually, if you look at this stuff and you be proactive, you can actually benefit your business. So in Queensland at the moment, we've got about 280,000 workers in our industry. So that's just in Queensland, 280,000, and we don't have enough people. And that's just not trades, construction workers, that is white collar professionals. It's across the board. And currently, and I don't have the Queensland stats, but nationwide, we lose 100,000 workers in our industry to natural attrition. So we've got an ageing workforce and 100,000 people in our industry get out. But what we're also seeing as well is that people are not retiring from the industry in all instances, but people are going to their boss and they're saying, I'm resigning, but I'm not just leaving your employment, I'm getting out of this industry. And that's for a range of factors that we'll probably talk about today. But we're not just seeing 100,000 people a year retire, we're seeing people also just getting out of the industry. And if we need to build all the houses we need to build to satisfy demand, we're already behind with the current workforce. And if we keep losing people...
And the Olympics.
We've got massive hospitals being built across the state. We've got Olympics. We've got, affordable housing, a range of different things that, I suppose, the government's plans, both federally and state, to build things. And we just don't have the people. And if we want to get smart, and if we want to say, well, we need to attract more workers, we can't continue to just employ people that look like me, pale, male. We can't keep doing that. We can't keep going to the same well.
Yeah, and I've actually heard along the way, I've actually heard business owners make comments that it's going to be too hard to have female workers because, of all the new laws coming in and things like that. And I'm like, but so crazy, because the benefits of it outweigh, the procedures that you might have to put in place to have, such a great broad work team. Me personally, I love female tradies. A lot of it is because, then it keeps the men in line a bit better. They have a different sort of objective on the way that they look at things. Men just tend to be a bit more sort of gung-ho naturally. Women sit back and think about things. Like, it just makes the team in itself a lot even out and better.
Definitely. Look, again, anecdotally, the members we speak to that put on female apprentices, we get amazing feedback. They say great attitude, hard workers. They are just really good to deal with. And people, I've never really had anyone call me up and say, I've got a female apprentice and they're giving me grief. We just don't have that. And but where we see the unconscious bias, and a lot of people will tell you, well, we don't have a problem in our industry, but that's the issue with unconscious bias. We don't know we've got a problem.
You don't know until you know.
And look, we had someone was talking to me once, and this just demonstrates unconscious bias brilliantly. But they called up and they said, Craig, I'm putting on an apprentice, and I've found someone, a young woman. I've spoken to them. I've spoken to the parents. Great attitude, everything I'm looking for in an apprentice. And I said, great, well, why are you calling me? They said, well, because they're a woman, I just need to understand what concessions or accommodations I need to make because they're a woman. Like, because women can't lift as much as men. So what do we do with manual handling? And I said, well, how do you know this person can't lift as much, or women can't? Like, it's just, and this person was totally innocently asking, wasn't prejudice or bias, just thought, well, I want to make sure I set this person up for success. So what do I do about lifting things? It's like, well, just treat them like you would anyone else.
Yeah. Like, even for me, there's some things that I am so surprised about that still happens. And that comes down to, to race as well. People, and again, it's not intentional. We're not saying, oh my God, you're a racist, you're a horrible person, but they make comments or treat people differently because, they, for whatever, because it's unconscious bias. So, and I know people that, I know a project manager who's very intelligent and he's an engineer and, whatever, and, he's Nigerian and he's had comments made to him. I know a site supervisor that's, Islander, same thing. And it's just a little comment and it's not anything crazy, but I'm saying like a little comment could be, oh, mate, where are you from? And they've been in Australia for the last 30 years.
Yes, exactly. And look, and that's the thing with unconscious bias. It's not just about gender, it's culture as well, it's age. I always tell the story. When I was first year uni, I did a commerce degree, and you're in first year, so you have to do all the introduction subjects. And I went to my first economics lecture, so introduction to economics or whatever it was called. 300 people in a lecture theatre, and I didn't have an economics background. I'd never studied it at high school. I thought, gee, this is going to be tough. And we're in a lecture theatre at the uni, 300 odd people, and in walks the lecturer. And just looking at him, he was Middle Eastern appearance. And straight away, I thought, oh no, look at this guy. He's probably broken English. I don't understand any of this stuff, and my lecturer is not going to be able to teach me anything, so I'm not going to be able to understand them. And he walks up to the lectern, leans into the microphone, and he says, "Yeah, g'day guys, how's going?" And straight away, I went, "Oh, how good's this guy?" So he was born overseas, but he came here very young, and his parents were Middle Eastern. But just straight away, like, I was unconsciously biased, and I thought, "Oh no!" Like, I mean, I could have even just walked out and gone, "I'm not even going to do this." And that's what we need to move on from, and we see it in recruitment as well. Like if you're employing someone, you'll get a stack of CVs, and sometimes you get lots. You might get 50, and you don't have time to go through them all. And if you get a surname that isn't Smith or Jones, straight away you put them on the discard pile. You say, "Oh no, well, they're not from here, so they're not going to know what they're doing."
Yeah.
And we just have that in us.
Yeah, see, I mean, for me, especially probably growing up in Sydney where it's so multicultural, and I've got friends of every nationality and things like that. But again, I've seen it, play out in many, many different ways. I had a friend of mine that was, he'd been in Australia for 20, 25 years, but French Caribbean, so real dark tattoos, big guy, actually was a professional bodybuilder in his heyday, and spoke 5 languages. Anyway, was just working, in a warehouse because he had to, and the way that they were treating him was terrible. And I said to him one day, I went, "Why don't you answer in like 5 different languages and see how intelligent they feel then?"
And I worked for a builder, and we were bringing some skilled migrants over, and English wasn't their first language, and they'd all come over and they all spoke like 3 languages. It was great. It can add so much to your business. And I think that I say to people when they're looking at this sort of thing, I say, well, look, the thing with unconscious bias is that firstly, you need to identify it, and you need to acknowledge that it exists. And the thing that I say to businesses, I say, look around the room. So look around your workplace. If everyone looks like you, you've probably got some unconscious bias there. It's not a criticism. I'm not saying you're doing anything unlawful. But if you look around the room and everyone looks like you, there's potentially some unconscious bias. And it even goes further than that with recruitment. If everyone that your recruitment pool, if you've got 20 people and they all look like you and sound like you, then again, what's the unconscious bias that you've got? Look in your boardroom, look at your leadership teams. Does everyone look like you? And these are the things that we need to address. And instead of looking at it like a problem, like, oh God, I've got to address my unconscious bias, actually look at it, as an opportunity. And say, well, look, let's get some diversity in here, some diversity of thought. It's not about just diversity for the sake of it, diversity of thought. Let's look at doing things differently. But men being men, and I'll pick on men because I am a man, we think, well, we've always done it this way and it's worked, so why would we change?
And I just think that especially in the world that we live in today, you really have to, be able to, pivot and move and, be innovative. And this is the thing, like even with age as well, having some unconscious bias towards age is, crazy to me as well. So I've always looked at it that if you, again, you mix your team up, because you're going to have the people, like if you've got the elder, people and things like that, you don't need them to be a young, gun bullet that's just going to run around and, get the job done. To have both of them is a fantastic mix, because you've got the old guy with the knowledge and you've got the young guy that can, do things a bit quicker or mobilize or, whatever. But you've got here the older guy that can supervise him, can teach him, are passing on that knowledge, which is what we need. If you want your business to, to have more sort of, you've got to have them have that inclusivity, because that's what you're going to attract as well, whether it is, age, race, gender, whatever it is. Like, the more that you have that, the more you understand that, the more, you can then business wise grow your business.
Yeah, and look, in construction, and I definitely sympathise with construction businesses, because sometimes it can be difficult to think long term because we're project driven. So if we need people on the job, we need to think about now. And sometimes we think, well, it'd be nice to have someone who's got a bit more experience but isn't as productive as a 20-year-old on site, but that's headcount, that's money, I can't afford it, I'm going to lose money on this job. But if we take that long-term view and we look at passing on that knowledge, then we benefit from it. I was talking to a member a couple of weeks ago, and this member's got an estimator in his office who's 82, still working at 82. Now, he's just working part-time, but 82. And I was what?
Okay. If I'm working at 82,
oh, exactly.
Can you just push me off the storing bridge?
I know, but this guy loves it, comes in a couple of days a week. I saw this member today, but he was telling me a story recently. He's got a concreter that's 68. And from an unconscious bias point of view, like if I'm looking for concreters and a 68-year-old contacts me, I'm thinking, well, he's probably got bad back, bad knees. I don't want to put him on because it's probably going to be a compo claim, but he could be very fit, healthy, and could be a great addition to the business. So we're missing out on those good people because of that unconscious bias. And sometimes we think about worst case scenario. We think, well, I don't want to put this person on because it's going to cost me too much to manage them. But we don't think of the flip side, which is, well, what happens if it works out? This could be great for the business.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's other ways to manage things like that as well. Like, because immigration at the moment, I feel like is a huge topic for us. Obviously the government's, was their fix for our skill shortage was, okay, let's like influx with immigration. That'll be great. But especially with construction, it is across the board. I know it's across the board. It doesn't, I did accounting recruitment at one point as well. And every time we got immigration, it's just, they need to get that first job. They end up probably with a job like down from what they were, until they understand Australian standards and, how we do things and all of that sort of stuff. So funnily enough, though, not only do we have the immigration from overseas, we've got immigration from down south, and, we're trying to make sure that, that we have people that are, put on site, like they know what they're doing and all of that sort of stuff. But again, it's like, we need to find a way to get around all of that, to be training people up and to, even get, say, for example, electricians that we can use as TAs that have sort of all the knowledge and, have done, commercial building or whatever back home for years and years. That's actually fantastic. Use their skill set to your advantage.
Yeah, we see it, and look, we don't even see it just in migration. Look, I see it even in Queensland. We think, well, geez, I'm not going to put a Victorian on this job because they're not used to working in the heat and humidity. And you even see it where people from Brisbane look at going north. Oh, they don't know how to work in the heat from Brisbane. And so we really, as I said at the start, we really just reduce our pool And then all of a sudden we're in a massive skills shortage, and government says, well, not government, I shouldn't say that, but some people say, well, let's bring in all these overseas migrants. Now, some people will say, and people have said this to me, they've got to learn the Australian way of building. And I get that to a certain extent, but the principles of engineering, of construction are universal. The pyramids were built in Egypt once upon a time, thousands of years ago. So it's not as if you say, well, because someone's from Egypt, they can't build.
They can't build anywhere else in the world. I mean,
right.
We're such a young country as well. And then we're talking, people coming from England, the places that have been established well before us. They've been doing construction well before us.
And look, and that's the thing, and it's really about understanding, people's background, people's qualifications, and just understanding as well that, you might have to spend a bit of time with them to understand the way we do things, but we even see that with different businesses. You leave one business, you go to another, and they've got a different way of doing things. That's always going to occur. So, but again, as I said, we need so many workers, and we do, through our unconscious bias. We exclude so many people just based on, whether it be gender, culture, age, all those unconscious reasons.
And do you think that's because, people, again, sort of don't really want to put in the effort to do the management side of it? Like they're already struggling to put the output into getting the job done and everything else like that, that they don't want to spend all the time, to manage that situation or try and, coach them, train them, whatever it is.
Look, generally speaking, yes. So one of our members, a good news story it maybe 12 months old, but they put on their first female apprentice, different than the story I was telling you earlier, but they put on a female apprentice, and the apprentice had been there about 3 months and was just going absolutely amazingly. And they contacted me and said, look, Craig, we've got a female here, been here 3 months. We haven't had any issues yet, but would you come out, do a bit of a toolbox training session, talking to everyone about sexual harassment? Because we're just worried that people might not understand it. And when I went out there and I was talking to a few people, basically what I found out was this business had failed to put on a female for years because they had some, more mature gentlemen working there, and they were worried, in their words, that they would sexually harass a young female. So for years, instead of actually addressing that behaviour, they thought, well, we won't employ any females and that'll solve our problem. Now, I went out there, toolbox sexual harassment with them. We did a great job. And a couple of months later, they sacked one of those older gentlemen for sexual harassment. He ended up resigning. But they just had all this stuff, and they said, look, we drew a line in the sand. We told you this is the expected behaviours. You haven't met them. This is what we're going to do. And he chose to self-select and resign. But some businesses think this is all too hard. And if I just have all men that look like me, I won't have a problem. But as I explain to people in our sexual harassment training, sexual harassment doesn't require it to be male to female. It can be male to male. Bullying, again, male to male, and all these things. And so if you think that you just employ pale, stale males, and you're not going to have any problems, you're wrong. And you're really selling yourself short and restricting the available labour that you can access.
It's so wild to me, though, that it's like this whole, again, let's just sweep everything under the rug so we don't have to deal with it, and then it'll never happen. It's just not reality. Let's instead have great procedures in place. Someone like yourself can help with that. Let's have some great procedures in place, know what we have to identify, teach our team about it, educate people about it, because there's been such a thing within construction for so long about, about sexual harassment and, it's funny, bullying, and I do feel to some point, some of this is, we've really swung the pendulum here. But to all these people that want to sit there and, I go on about this all the time. This is like, I think this is in my podcast every week. But I really, really get sick and tired of people turning around and going, well, I'm sorry, they're a bunch of pussies, or she should put up with it, or, oh, well, you know, he's young, he needs to like get on board with the attitude, like we had to do the hard yards. Well, I'm sorry, none of that is right. It wasn't ever okay. So now why, you know, like it was never okay, ever.
Yeah, that's true. And look, we run resilience training here, and I think people come to resilience training, and we run it for managers, and we say, well, look, how can you make your workers more resilient? And I think people come here and they think that we'll tell them that it's all the workers' fault and not their fault. And what we say to them is the way to build resilience in your workers is to make it a better place to work. And I remember when I read Rosie Batty's book a number of years ago, and she talked about the fact that, you know, she was experiencing domestic violence, and, you know, people would either say to her face or behind her back, well, why doesn't she just leave? And Rosie Batty would say, well, why doesn't the behaviour just stop? And it's so true. And, you know, members will speak to me and they'll say, oh, Craig, it's just, and this isn't a gender thing, it's just young people. They say, oh, young people aren't resilient. We need to make them more resilient. And I say, well, look, yeah, maybe there is some lessons in resilience. And, you know, when I always say, when I was a kid, I played my first rugby league grand final when I was 7 years old. We had grand finals from under sevens all the way through. Whereas now my son's rugby league, they don't play grand finals to under 13s or 14s. Everyone gets a prize. So look, there is something to be said about resilience, but at the same time, someone shouldn't have to be resilient against sexual harassment, against bullying. We should just stop the behaviour. And that's what we talk about, the positive environment. Allow people to come to work and be themselves and not have to put on a mask when they come to work because they're worried about how they'll be treated.
We have like the fallout and the effects of, you know, of this behaviour as so like on the grand scale of things, you know, to like being unhappy at home, to, you know, to us having the, you know, highest rate in suicide, and, you know, all of these things. And at what point do you not want to sit there and go, I need to be a part of the change, whatever that means, just inside my business, because that's what I can control and that's what I can do. But I want to be a part of, you know, of this progression and being, you know, better and showing people what it's like. Now, from a recruitment side of things, you know, as well, let me tell you that, you know, if you have all of those sorts of things and you have that environment, not everyone's looking for money, you know. People want to work for the place where they're going to feel like they're part of a tribe, where they've got their own community, where they're being heard. You know, all of those sorts of things are more important to anyone, because at the end of the day, we're a human being. And so we need those things to make us happy. And that's also what's going to attract the best possible candidates and people for your business. So, you know, if you're not even going to be like want to deal with the human side of things, to know that you should be a part of the change and you should be leading from the front. And, you know, especially as a business owner, I think there's so much information out there, you know, as well, to show you how you can, you know, help build resilience, but really about like what positive and negative feedback is. I do it with my staff, and I make sure that I tell them when they're doing something right, and I can set the bar. I don't sit there every day and expect to pat everyone on the bum and, you know, make them feel good, give them a warm and fuzzy hug. None of us have time to do that as business owners. But what you do have time to do is take care in the fact that, you know, you've got staff working for you, and without them, then you don't have anything. You don't have a business. You can't get a job done. So, you know, you need to, there's definitely better ways to be able to manage that, and even say to them, this is what I need you to do. This is your targets. This is how, you know, it needs to be done.
Yeah, I always say in building and construction, people build projects, and you might be able to import a car or import, a dining room set from overseas and sell it in Kmart or whatever it is. But when it comes to building and construction, people build projects. And look, for a long time, and we're much better at it, but I know when I first started working 25 years ago, the only way you knew you were doing a good job is if your boss didn't talk to you, because the boss would only talk to you to tell you were doing a bad job. I remember once my boss didn't talk to me for 2 years. It was the greatest 2 years of my life. I thought, well, I must be doing something right. But we're getting better at it. And what we're seeing now in the literature is this sense of belonging. People are looking for belonging at work. They want to understand, they want to know, they've got purpose. So, the previous generations, my parents, again, I'm generalizing, you went to work, you hated your job, but you did it, you cashed your check, and that was just life. Mm-hmm. Whereas now people are saying, well, no, I want purpose. I want to belong. I want to feel like I'm contributing, but I also want to feel like I can be myself, that I can be my whole self, my authentic self, and I can be safe at work. And I don't just mean physical safety, but I mean psychological safety as well. I can be vulnerable. I can say, hey, I'm under the pump, I'm stressed, I need some time. I think for leaders, what I really try and tell leaders is you need to have a bit of humility. And, as a white male or a cisgender male, a straight cisgender male, as my daughter would say, I don't know everything. So sometimes I have to just say, look, tell me about your experience. As a woman, tell me about your experience. As someone from a non-English speaking background, tell me about your experience, and let's work together on how we can address it and make this a better place to work. And sometimes as leaders, we don't like to do that. We like to pretend like we know everything. We're never stressed. We're never worried. We just come in, we do our work, and we just are always feeling good. But, we have to have that humility and vulnerability as leaders. But we also have to be giving people feedback. And again, it's not about everyone gets a prize, and it's not about positive feedback all the time, but it's just little things. It's just actually acknowledging a good job, acknowledging when someone does something, and not just ignoring them until they do a bad job. It's very, very simple.
I think, for a good few jobs of mine, I got told that, my personality wasn't right. It didn't matter about that I was doing the job well. I didn't fit into their mold, To be honest, I'm glad, because they were all really stuck up, boring people. So that's a whole different thing. But and it wasn't the right job for me. And it's been a huge journey for me to to get to where I am. And finally I'm I feel so comfortable about where I am and the business that I run. But even in that, a big thing for me was being able to go out on my own and do recruitment how I want to do it, and treat people how I want to treat them, and not be governed by someone else and how they do it. I find especially a lot of, recruiters, considering we're in the job of humans, don't act like a human. Don't talk to people. Don't find out what they're doing. And, I pride myself on trying to have relationships with people. Like some of the people that have worked for me have been with me for 2 years, even though I do labor hire. That's a long time. You've got to be able to recognize when people are going through things in their life, rather than just, cutting them off and, going, oh, they're not performing anymore, that's it. And then, to do that, they need to see that you're a human being, like what you're saying. Otherwise, they don't want to come and talk to you, because, you've got no connection, you've got no relationship. You're just the boss that barks at them, or, whatever.
And that's a challenge for you in labour hire, especially, because, people call you at 6:30 in the morning and they'll say, I need 3 people here right now, get them there. And if you call someone and they're not reliable, or they can't get there, it can be very difficult as a leader to look past what might be going on in their life, and actually look at them as a person and go, well, normally they're really reliable. What's the problem here? Let's have a discussion about it. But look, it's hard. And look, we've all had bad bosses. And we always say when we're in positions working for bad bosses that if we ever get to that stage, we'll never be like that. But you know, when you're looking at your budget and you're looking at your expenses and you're looking at the performance of the business, it can be hard to not be that terrible boss.
So, you know, we've done a great conversation today. So thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. You've got some great insight onto how to help people. And, you know, we'll definitely put the links to Master Builders as well, so they can, you know, find you and get some, see if they've got any, see if they have access to the e-docs and things like that. But what would you say are the biggest sort of 3 takeaways that you should look out for in your own business when it comes to unconscious biasness?
Sure. Look, it differs depending on size, of course, but as I said earlier, you've got to look around your workplace and you've got to ask yourself, look, if everyone here is the same gender, same cultural background, you know, do I have some unconscious bias, and is that something I need to look at? So I think observation's a big one. Look around. The second thing you need to do is you need to learn about it, but you also need to unlearn those unconscious biases. So you can't just say, well, look, we might have an issue here, but you know, that's just the nature of the industry. We do have more men. We do have more people from an Anglo background. We need to actually acknowledge that we might have an issue, and we need to take positive steps to actually address that. So how can we increase diversity, inclusion, equity in the workplace? We need to look at that. And you sort of touched on it. It's about leading from the front, and it's not just unconscious bias. It's all leadership. It's really calling out bad behaviours. If you see something that is unconscious or conscious bias, you call it out, and that's really important.
And what would you say the biggest positive is, you know, for making sure that you recognize it and you do something about it?
Sorry, Chantal, what was the question there?
What do you think the biggest, you know, positive is if you do decide to recognize it and then do something about it? What's the best outcome that you'll see?
Thank you. Look, it's just really getting access to a broader range of workers. We have a skills shortage. People call us all the time and they say they can't get people. And what you're doing is you're actually getting, number one, you're getting more people into your business. If you can't find someone, you've got to open it up broadly, eliminate the unconscious bias so that you can get people of different genders, cultural backgrounds and ages into your business. And what you also find is you get that diversity of thought. You get an understanding of different ways of doing things. If someone, you know, comes from overseas, they might build slightly differently, and they might say, well, why don't we do it this way? They might have efficiencies. Again, different genders as well. They'll look at projects differently than what other genders will look at. So diversity of thought is a really big one for me as well. And where we see that in businesses, where people from different backgrounds, genders, whatever it is, come together, we get those better outcomes.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. You've come with a lot of knowledge, and it's great to, you know, see other people in the industry are taking this subject on and educating people to make sure that
there's definitely demand for it. As I said, like members, we run training courses, and members are actually contacting us saying, tell us about sexual harassment, tell us about bullying, tell us about equity, diversity and inclusion. We're doing some great things, and but we can always improve.
I love that. That makes me so excited. I'm always trying to give back to the industry. I love it, you know, and so, you know, I'm here to help bring awareness, make change. And, you know, we obviously partner up with Master Builders and do a lot of events and sponsor you guys, and it's for good reason. You are amazing and support businesses. It's fantastic. We definitely have such a big need for you. So,
and look, it is a great industry. I think people have to remember that. It's great. It's rewarding, both financially, but also just being able to look at your work. It's a great industry. I'd recommend it to anyone.
Yeah, love it. All right. Thank you for today. and anytime, and I will make sure that we add all of the links, as I'm saying, when we do the podcast and things like that.
Right. Thanks, Sean.
Thanks for listening to Talent Instinct. I'm Chantal Penny, and if you want more razor sharp insider info on instinctivizing your hiring game, then hit the subscribe button. Oh, and remember to drop a killer rating and review. Please don't hold back. Spread the news to fellow construction business owners too. If you want to stay ahead of the curve and soak up all of my content, please do so by stalking us on Talent Instinct and my brainchild Siteforce Recruitment on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram.